Regarding Men, Episode 31. Women admit that marriage is prostitution, and they like it that way.
Hey everybody, Paul Elam here with a voice for men and an ear for men. And as always, for Regarding Men, I am joined by the one, and I'm telling you only, Janice Fiamingo, formerly of the University of Ottawa, now editor at large for Men of the World, roving around, stirring up trouble, speaking the truth to power, and doing all kinds of other great things. And with us, of course, is Mr. Tom Golden, the one and only himself of menaregood.com, reminding men for the past, I don't know how many years, decades, that they're worthwhile. And that sort of is part of the driving force behind these discussions. And today on Regarding Men, we're going to discuss a recent New York Post article and articles extending out from that on the poor women of our society are having a harder time finding men to make enough money that makes them worthy of marriage. Janice, I see you have a box of Kleenex behind you. I think that's probably going to be in order for use during this because, you know, my heart is bleeding for these women who can't find men that make at least 60, 70K a year to marry. I mean, because my God, who's going to take care of them? If these deadbeat men, and not only deadbeat dads, but now deadbeat men. And the New York Post article started out the very first sentence by saying they can't find men because men can't get their act together. The first thing they had to say is a slur at all men. And never mind the idea that men have been falling out of education like flies for the past 20, 30 years, never mind that they've been marginalized in management positions, that they've been pushed off to the side to make room for women. And never mind that if people are going to be unemployed, they're more likely to be male than female. But we'll forget all that and the implications of what that really all means and just stick with the fact that these deadbeats don't make enough money to satisfy women, and why we as a society should be direly concerned about this. Of course, I got to tell you guys, I don't even know why they brought it up. I mean, I know they did. This is another angle to attack men. First, you attack men for not wanting to get married, and that plays out for a while. So now you got to attack them for not being worthy of being married. And so that's sort of a little bit of a new angle. But I'm thinking, why even bring this up? Because if you're going to foster a discussion of solutions, that would involve men making more money. And we know damn well they're not going to have that. That discussion is not going to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this another round of righteous indignation and virtue signaling about how bad men are morally and they won't take care of women and they can't take care of women. And they're, you know, what's the difference between a man and a pizza? A pizza can feed a family of four. There'll be jokes, all kinds of cruelties and everything, but there won't be a discussion of solutions, which of course would be for men to be gainfully employed and not to mention make marriage more attractive. The article didn't go into the fact that I'm guessing a whole lot of these men don't care to get married anyway. And not that anybody would blame them. But we're throwing that out there for discussion. There was also an extended article, which we will link below, that was linked in the original article about how women now, in this case, New York, are starting to marry down as a solution to this problem. God, the condescension dripping from that very idea is just staggering. And they actually show a picture of an attorney with her very nice, expensive briefcase and nice business suit on, standing next to her electrician husband wearing his work belt and shorts and a t-shirt, I think. And she doesn't want her last name mentioned. Now imagine what level of respect you have for your husband if you say, I want to be a part of this story about women marrying down, and by the way, hide my identity. so nobody knows that I married this loser. This is some really disturbing stuff. We can laugh at it, and it is funny. It's absolutely funny to even hear women complain that there's not enough Mr. Moneybags running around, not enough patriarchs, in other words,
Right.
for them that are marriageable for them to hook onto and use for their resources. I mean, it's sort of like we debated titles on these, and one of these or one of the titles debated was "The Hoes Are Running Out of Jobs." And hey, man, if the stilettos fit, put them on. But anyway, that's my open for this. I want to toss this out now to either Tom or Janice to follow up, and let's have a discussion on this stinker of a subject.
Well, I'll tell you, Paul, the first thing that comes to my mind is that every woman's problem must involve something men did or didn't do. Just about every one. There's never a problem that I've seen for women that they take responsibility for. There's accountability, just over and over again. And what do? They blame the victim. As many times as we've heard these feminist harpies talk about, you can't blame the victim, they do it repeatedly. Men have been villainized for the last 50 years. We've been pushed out of universities. All kinds of bad things have happened. What do? They blame, it's men's fault that they're not making more money. Oh gosh, they're putting us women at a disadvantage. Oh, boo-hoo.
Because the wage gap, right?
The wage gap.
Yeah, it's never addressed in the article. I mean, there's a sentence that says, many young men today have little to bring to the marriage bargain, especially as young women's educational levels on average now exceed their male suitors. This is the lead author of the study, someone named Daniel Lichter. Well, if women's educational levels exceed that of many men, then why do they need men to be making so much money in the first place? The utter incoherence of this so-called problem is revealed right there in the comment of the researcher, and yet it's never addressed in the article. And the utter incoherence of a woman-centered culture that has been demanding quite explicitly over the last, as you say, Tom, over the last 40 years or 50 years, that men step away from the power, as Professor Susanna Walters insisted in that article a couple of years ago, Why Can't We Hate Men? Men step away from the power, men step aside to allow women to take positions in industries and companies that men themselves created, that women be given affirmative action hiring in a whole range of job sectors. In academia, of course, we've seen the insistence that through special scholarships and special hiring protocols and everything else, that women be given priority over men. That's been going on. That's been an explicit goal. Now the results are in, and suddenly this is now men's fault, that men are not able to achieve the kind of success that women expect them to do. But the women have been telling men that they must not do that, that it's a sign of patriarchal oppression. I kept wondering whether this article was actually written by The Onion.
Yes.
Because
exactly.
It's and the research, results, the study that the article is based on, whether it wasn't a kind of joke study as well. It's absolutely astounding. But I guess it's real. Everything says that it is a serious study written by one, I don't know if I wrote down the name, a female author, who of course never considers any of what she's talking about from the men's point of view. And that's also kind of staggering about the article.
Yes.
If this were an article that criticized any, or there never would be such an article. Let's say if this were an article that looked at some element of women's behavior in a negative way, which is pretty hard to imagine in itself. But let's say there was something, I don't know what, I can't even think of anything right now, but if it were, can you, I mean, yeah, I was going to say, women abusing their children, but there wouldn't be an article about that. But if there were such an article, you can bet that a whole squadron of pro-female commentators would be brought into the article to explain why it isn't really women's fault, or why, we should actually be thinking about solutions to help these women control this behavior or address this shortcoming or challenge or whatever. And there's nobody even thinks to ask, why is it that men are now earning less? And we know why, that we've just said, because they've been pushed out of the opportunities. For some men, it's just not worth it to achieve a great deal when you know that it can all be taken away by a false allegation or by a grasping woman who decides to charge you with something. In many other cases, men simply are not given the opportunity to take these positions. They're overtly taken away from men and given to women. I've seen this going on in academia for at least 20 years. Very well qualified men passed over for positions, those positions given to lesser qualified women. So, I mean, yeah, it is really, it's just astounding. And I thought it was also interesting that in that sentence I just read out about the marriage bargain, and there's another statement about women, about marriage being an economic transaction. The researcher says, of course, love is important, but let's face it, marriage is an economic transaction. So now we're actually admitting that that's what marriage is, that that's how women see it, that's admitted as, perfectly legitimate. And so I think it's very interesting to ask, well, what are men supposed to get out of this deal? It's clear what men are supposed to bring to the deal. They're supposed to bring all these resources for women. What are they supposed to get out of it?
Well, Janice, they get
the satisfaction of taking care of them.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it's obvious.
Until she decides that she doesn't want to be looked after anymore.
And would prefer just child support. Yes.
Yeah.
Or alimony, or half the community property, which basically means she gets everything, because community property, a product of divorce here, I can tell you, is a farce. There is no such thing as community property. There's no such thing as really splitting it down the middle. What I've also, along the lines of what you were saying, Janice, it's very, very important. That is the question of what's the motivation for men to attach these women anyway. You'll find another article linked below demonstrating women hold 66% of student loan debt in the United States. They also owe roughly the same amount of credit card debt, around 66%, or 2/3 of all credit card debt is women's. Men is 33%, but they're more fiscally responsible. So what we're looking at here, if we look at the numbers honestly, and we look at the complaints honestly and where they're coming from, women are upset because nobody's coming along saying, hey, I'm here to pay all your bills for you. I'm here to pay off your student loan. I'm here to pay off your credit cards, and to have you get me indebted. After we get through paying for all your stuff, then we can start putting your lifestyle on my dime. This is exactly what we're talking about. And I think the great silent wisdom of men is that they're checking out of this bullshit arrangement, that they're actually starting to look at numbers and saying, yeah, she's really nice, she's really pretty, she comes with $30,000 in debt, and she has her eye on that part-time job. Because that's what happens when a lot of women marry. They begin to take responsibility off their shoulders. If they've been single, they've been responsible for their own lives anyway. Well, how responsible they've been if they're in hock up to their ears is another matter. But they have at least borne the burden of that. That burden then is transferred to the men that they marry, which is why they need men who make a lot more money. So after marginalizing men, pushing them to the side, drumming them out of education, drumming them out of success in the workplace, they are frustrated because those same men aren't there to pay their bills. This is the most insane movement in human history. It absolutely is. Can't even comprehend anything like it.
I agree. And vicious to boot. You know, I mean, the article starts out and says something about broke men, you know, and it's like, no, it's not broke men, it's broken men. And you've been breaking them for 50 stinking years. Back up. It's just, oh.
Yes, notice they're not financially disadvantaged.
Right. They're broke.
They're broke, which, of course, to men, you know, a man wants to hide his face when he's broke. It's embarrassing. It drives men to killing themselves.
Yes, it does.
God, this is a horrible but revelatory examination of where our culture is really at.
Yes.
Right now.
It really is. Yeah. And the simple solution, if we're going to admit that this is what the vast majority, as the research suggests, if this is what the vast majority of women want, is to marry a man who makes a lot of money, or makes more money than they do anyway, so that they don't have to marry down, as that poor lawyer had to do. It's impossible to find words to express how outrageous these sentiments are. But if this is what we're going to admit, that marriage is, after all these years of feminist denial and feminist denunciation of stereotyping and all that kind of thing, if now we're coming to the point where we're going to say that, yes, marriage is an economic transaction in which men have to bring resources in order to buy the woman's whatever, even if it is a commitment. It's not clear that women are willing to make commitments or to love their men or to be faithful to them. But if that is what marriage is, then this is the definition of toxic femininity, in that it has destroyed the thing that women now say they want, and it won't even admit what the obvious answer to the problem is. And the obvious answer is, women, you should stop taking men's jobs. We've got to stop with the whole drive, which we see in every other newspaper article that we read, to get women into positions as CEOs of companies, and to get more women on, corporate boards, and to get more women into engineering, and to get more women into medicine, and to get, more women into law, and all of these things. Well, let's actually admit that women shouldn't be doing that. That whole project, which has been going on I've known it personally for over 20 years, but I think it's been going on since the late 1970s as specific legal projects, government mandated projects. That has been a disaster. If women want to create their own jobs and head them up, and create new sectors of the economy, that's one thing. But to take over the industries and the professions that men built, and to say that that's their right, and now to condemn men because they are no longer the heads of these industries and sectors, it's the definition of insanity. And it has a very clear solution. Stop doing it, women. Admit that the whole affirmative action, the whole get women at the center of things, women make companies stronger, etc. Admit that whole thing has been a disastrous lie.
And if you're going to admit that you are incapable of being a fully functioning partner in a marriage, and if you're going to admit that everything else that you claim to want is a lie, and you're going to fashion your relationships after money grubbing, then please feel free to put on your high heels, fishnet stockings, get a feather boa, and stand under the street lamp. Let's really get honest about what this is about, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about prostitution. I don't want to marry a guy unless he makes twice as much money. Well, no, it's not because he makes twice as much money. It's because he can give you twice as much money.
Hmm.
That's why you're marrying him.
Hmm.
And I do think people should be honest about that. And I don't excuse the men who marry these women either. You get what you marry. If you marry a trophy wife, you're a guy that makes big bucks, and you marry somebody strictly for their looks. I mean, look at the marriage of Anna Nicole Smith before that all ended tragically for her. You get what you pay for, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and Janice's point about having women pull back from the workforce, I think, is an interesting one. And it also mirrors something I've felt for a long time, and that is what we've been doing to our children. You know, the children, as we've put women into the workforce, the children we've given to people who really don't love them. You know, we've had our children now in these daycares where, I mean, the people may be nice and whatever, but they in nowhere come close to being what a mother or father could love in that child. And I just remember when my wife and I, when we had kids, my wife and I both went part-time. So we could each spend time at home. You know, we had basically two stay-at-home parents, you know, although both of us were not there together. And it was so critical to be able to love those kids for that time. We don't have that anymore. We're completely devoid of that. We're shipping kids off to people who don't give a crap about them. And that's probably just as bad as filling the workforce with people who are not as good as someone else. It's like, we're living in a crazy place. It's just nutty.
And that is a complicated mess. You know, I've got mixed feelings about what you just described, Tom, because on one hand, I don't want to bar the workplace to anybody. I believe people should be able to follow their dreams and pursue what makes them happy.
Yes.
And at the same time, you know, you have children, they have needs that aren't going to be fulfilled by daycare.
Yes.
And you can hear this in the stories of literally thousands of women who worked through the early parts, and their biggest regrets is that they weren't there for things like first steps and first words and the developmental milestones that their children went through.
Yes.
Tremendous void where that experience should have been.
Unquestionably, was probably the best part of my entire life. Was that part where I was able to stay at home with those kids and be with them through everything they did, from poops to steps to words to, I mean, it's just everything. And it's a real critical honor to be able to do that, you know, and we've lost that. We've really lost it. Sad to me.
It is sad. And
I got us way off topic, didn't I?
Well, no, not really. No, I don't think it is off topic.
Oh, good. That's good.
You can't. It's hard to talk about the realities of marriage without the realities of children.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah, and feminism said from the beginning that marriage was one of the primary sites of women's oppression, and that, you know, the patriarchal family had to be broken up.
Right.
And here we are in 2019, 50 years into the second wave feminist movement, where most of feminism's goals have obviously been achieved. And now we have an article saying that women are very unhappy because they can't find marriageable men. So,
you know, so we have, like, the past 20 years has been one unending stream of articles about why women are unhappy.
Yes.
And of course, all of them pointing at men.
Exactly.
And none of them pointing in the mirror.
And that's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
No one's holding women accountable.
The worst thing feminism ever did to women was to excuse their responsibilities in life. Yeah. And to make excuse and to play victim. That infantilization is the worst thing that ever happened to women. And it's why we do, generally speaking, have a society of women who are unhappy. I mean, all the studies that come out all the time about women's level of happiness, they're consistently less happy than men are.
Yes.
And they're miserable. And this is what feminism has brought them, is emotional isolation and misery.
Gynocentrism.
Yep.
Yet again.
Yeah.
Is the
And
fuel for all this bullshit.
and disguised by resentment. And that's
Yes.
it's such a toxic combination.
Yeah, good point. Disguised by resentment. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and it's so amazing to me that an article like this can be written, and at the end there is no discussion of, okay, what can women do
Oh,
to make
how dare you?
What a concept.
Yeah, and that is, I was talking about this with a friend over email. If you ask men, what are your responsibilities to society? Men are, pretty clear about that and pretty willing to say, well, this, and this, and I owe women this. Like, men don't bristle when you say, what do you owe women in the world? They'll step forward and say, yeah, this is what I want to do for women. I'm interested in helping women, assisting them, helping them to make their lives better, all that. You ever ask women, what do you owe men? What do you think you and women in general should do to support men and make their lives better? All you get is fury in response.
I don't owe men anything.
I don't owe men anything. Exactly.
They had it all for thousands of years.
Yeah,
and it's my turn to have it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't owe you, a comfortable place in society. I don't owe you a respected role. I don't owe you love and fidelity. I don't owe you anything. And it says it all. And this article really, I think, encapsulates the contradictions, the deep unhappiness, the man blaming, and that overlay of resentment. Wow, it's
the lack of self-awareness in the author of that is just mind-boggling.
Yes, and no one notices.
Well, yeah, that's what feeds a lack of self-awareness, is what I was talking about earlier.
Yes,
we are socializing women in there's no way for them to become happy and adjusted unless they break free of the socialization that we're currently practicing.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's still on them to do that. But in that regard, I'm not kidding. I do feel for women, because we live in a society that sets them up for permanent misery.
Exactly.
And it's not fair.
And the research is clear. They are miserable. Look at the happiness ratings for women. It's gone down, down, down. Happiness ratings for men have stayed the same or got a little better,
It's funny, as men continue to increasingly not marry, their happiness level.
Yeah, and it's also funny, Paul, as men are increasingly bashed and villainized, they still stay feeling pretty good,
amazing.
I love men.
Yes.
Men are good.
Men are good.
Men are good.
Well, shall we give out some awards?
Oh, I think so.
Well, I will announce the winner of the Flying Puta Award is going to be, and we don't know her name because she wouldn't give it. So I'm going to say her name for the purpose of this award is I'm a Puta.
Is that Mrs. I'm a Puta?
That's Mrs. I'm a Puta, who married the electrician and consequently married down so much to the point that she's embarrassed to have her name out in public. And she actually got this beta chump to pose for this picture with her. Anyway, we've shown her picture on the screen, and the Flying Puta Award goes to Miss Ima Puta of New York City.
She'll fly by any moment. There she goes.
There she went.
Oh, well. And the humanitarian?
I say we give it to the husband for marrying. He married her. He did something good for her. I mean, I think it was absolutely beta move. Let's clarify something here about the dynamics of what's happening when women marry down. Whatever this guy makes, first, electricians make pretty decent money.
Yeah, really.
Experienced journeymen, they make good money. So by marrying down, finding a guy beta enough to even accept this article and the photo setup and everything else, she's married a guy she can walk like a dog. I guarantee that's part of the scenario here. So I still, out of a pity award, I want to give this guy the humanitarian award for marrying this condescending, awful wretch of a woman who would treat her marriage like an object of embarrassment.
Yeah, really, that's sad, eh?
And attach that to the image of her husband. Absolutely, she deserves it, and so does he.
Yeah, and so it goes.
And so it goes.
Yeah. Another exciting episode of Regarding Men.
Always ending on a happy note around.
Oh, God. So are we finished?
I think we're done.
I think we are. It's been good. It's been good.
It has been.
We will see you all next week for the next installment. Men are good.
Remember,
men
are
good.
All right. Now we can turn it off. All right, we'll see you.